All right, it is now 2 o'clock. We're going to start the presentation. First off, I'm just going to introduce myself and then I'll let the team introduce themselves. That way, those people, if they do come online, they can actually capture who's talking through that image. I'm Charlie Mops. I'm the Public Works Director for the town of Longboat Key. To my left.
Hello, my name is Mark Stroik. I'm with First Line Coastal. We're consultants to the town, designers, engineers for the project. We also have one more with us who's joining online. She was actually sick today, so we asked her to stay home, keep the rest of us safe. Her name is Tara Hollis. She is with Wilden Associates, who's an accounting firm, also consultants to the town.
Right, and I would like to recognize we have former Vice Mayor Haycock in the audience. We also have Commissioner Brenham, and I think Commissioner Bishop is going to be attending as well later. So I'm going to share my screen so those that do join will actually be able to follow along with us. And ma'am, if you don't mind signing in. So as you can see, like this is our town website. What we're trying to be is super transparent with the potential development of this program. And what we have is we have the first button, which says navigation program. Eventually, if you don't find it there, you can find it under residents, under waterway navigation maintenance program. It'll take you to the same website. So just by clicking on that, it brings you to here. And this will have a bunch of information about meeting events, future meeting events, current meeting events. And eventually, after the meeting has been held and recorded, a link to those recordings will actually be replacing the dates. So that way people can go back and see something previous. The message isn't changing, but just in case you maybe missed something or want to revisit a certain topic, it will be on here. Within here, though, there is a couple of other spots. Why this project matter? Well, if you click on this button, it'll actually take you to this website, which is the Longboat Key. It was built by First Line Consultants, and it has all the information that we're going to be sharing tonight. So every aspect of briefing material or whatnot is actually in this website. So you don't, again, transparency and just trying to be collecting as much data and everything else as we possibly can. If you're more like, hey, what's the bottom line up front? You could click right here and it will bring you to a spot that we're going to go share it as a group together in a minute. But it will bring you to a GIS-based site where you can actually click on your property or put in your property address, and it will tell you if you're a non-canal fronting property, what the millage alone would be. If you're a canal fronting property, what the millage and assessment would be. And it'll break it down, and I'll show you how to do all of that really quick and easy. So we're going to go right into this website, which again was that first click. And if you go in here, here's the presentation. I wonder if I can move that. Yes. All right. So obviously it was left at the very end because somebody must have been looking at it, which is good. Because we want people to visit these sites. As a matter of fact, one of our residents actually came to me. There's like, oh, there's a lot of information online. I'm able to see a lot of that information, and I was able to like kind of glean an idea before I even got here. So that's a good thing. So, protecting our waterways is vital important to the quality of life for our island community. If you look at that picture, Longboat Key is unique. It is the entire city is within an island. So we have, beaches on the front side, and we have a beautiful bay, which is a national estuary program on the back side. And so we're just one shared community. And it aligns with the commission's, mission and values. Commissioner Bishop just walked in. Hello, ma'am. So, with our vision and our mission, we're natural assets of the Barrier Island combined with cultural and recreational amenities. So, we have like a lot of parks. We have we have our beaches. We maintain all of those things. The mayor just walked in as well. So we have quite a crew here. So we're trying to maintain yet another aspect of those cultural amenities. The vigorous maintain and preserve Longboat's Key status as a premier residential and visitor destination. So this program, because it's not a project, it's a program, that we looked at this vision and this mission and made sure that it was aligning with that. So, here's a picture of a canal that, on the north end where it's a little skinny, and you could just see that, our property values and quality of life resolve around clean water navigable channels. Again, we're on the National Estuary Program. Sarasota Bay Estuary Program is one of only a handful of national recognized estuaries in the country. And because of the water quality from our bay is shared in our canals, there's a linking factor there. Our waterways are a shared amenity that support each of us, and we'll get into a little bit more of that. And then historic overview. So the last time these canals were ever dredged were back in 2003. So 23 years ago was the last time as a municipality we dredged any of the canals in the town. The issue was originally developed back in 1996 when the commission asked, and they actually formed a group of residents to come up with a funding strategy to move forward with that. And some of the funding strategies that they came up with back in the 90s are going to be, very similar to what we're presenting today. There was over 30 reviews and public hearings, including commission meetings, all publicly advertised and publicly attended. But the delays have led to navigability, even though they've been trying to establish this program over that period of time. Delays in establishing the program since 2003 have led to areas that are hurting more than others. So as we roll down. So why now? Well, we've been kicking this can down the road pretty good, where to the point it's flat, right? It doesn't roll anymore. So we're trying to get a once in a generation opportunity. This group, our consultants and town staff working with our commission, have gotten farther than any other group has gotten to this point, which is we have the ability, and we had set up through the commission and resolution and ordinance, the ability to use our Manatee County property appraisers and Sarasota County property appraisers to actually help us implement this program through their tax bill. So what's the plan? Well, it's a responsible phased waterway navigation maintenance program. It's dedicated to the waterway navigation only. It's restoring safe navigable channels. It's improving and maintaining stormwater systems. I don't know why this Microsoft Team thing keeps doing this, but I'm sorry. And I'll show you a little bit about that in a minute. And it mimics the 80/20 beach program that we currently, you guys currently through bond referendum fund with the state, because the state always, contributes a percentage towards those beach nourishment projects. And then what it's geared to do is reduce overall long-term costs. So we don't get into the point of restoration. We keep in the process of maintenance, so we're trying to get back to that maintenance process. So what are some of the benefits? Again, it restores and maintains that access for recreational boaters. There's been past meetings where Vice Mayor Williams just walked in. It maintains and restores access. We've had questions before, like, well, my canal right now doesn't need to be dredged, but it's not to say it won't. That's why it's a program, not a project. So, all of the canals that come out of Longboat Key, including our access channels, our perimeter channels, they were cut through sandbars. Okay, well, those sandbars shift, and eventually it'll choke off or narrow the navigability of that channel, or silt it in to reduce the depth that channel currently exists. And that's why it's a long-term program. And then improves and maintains the stormwater flow. And again, I'll get a little bit more into that. And it reinforces the appeal for real estate and tourism. Being on a municipal maintained waterway will definitely increase or could potentially increase the property values of those properties. There's a potential to reuse this dredge material to actually create, which is one of the first things we have to do, is a seagrass mitigation area out in that aquatic preserve or that National Estuary Program. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that in a minute. And then there's other environmental enhancements that come along with dredging canals. On the east coast of Florida, where they get a lot of green algae and stuff like that, they actually dredge canals to reduce the bioload that's on the bottom of those canals. The bioload on the bottom of those canals actually contributes to those nasty things that are like red tide. You know, those are things that would feed those organisms. As a matter of fact, I was just on the phone yesterday with Ryan Gandy, who's the director of the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program, and he was asking me because he's getting calls about this potential program. And he agreed that yes, by reducing bioload, you're going to reduce the potential food source for some of those bad things. And then the potential for future FEMA reimbursement. In the 15 years I ran this program for Charlotte County, I was literally dredging two major areas, Pirate Harbor and another one, big dredge projects that were going on. Hurricane Charlie came through. So we had to enact our hurricane plan, get the contractors away into safety. But before they left, we went out there and surveyed what they already did. And after Hurricane Charlie came through, those canals got silted in. Well, FEMA funded the restoration of those canals because they were part of a maintenance program. And we were able to show that level of service. So how are we going to pay for this? Well, this is why, one of the reasons we hired First Line. Now, one thing that you got to know about First Line was helping me down in Charlotte County when I was doing that. They were working with Coast Engineering consultants who had been doing that, maintaining that, management of that program for even before I got there. But we hired them and they came up with this model. It's a fair, simple, transparent funding model that's similar to the beach nourishment. That's why it's at 80% and the 20%. So 80% would be borne by those direct canal access properties, and 20% would be covered by the non-direct access properties. We are estimating a cost of about $9 million for the first 5 years. We need that much money because we need to create, as part of our permits, that seagrass mitigation area. And those things aren't cheap. They come at about a price tag of about $3 million. Now, we'll show you why. Then after that, when we start getting in that programmatic maintenance, so hey, your canal doesn't need to be dredged now, but it might in the future. This is where those funds will come in order to affect change in the future. So the methodology, the millage plus direct assessment was what we presented to the commission in the direction by which they gave us to, review and see if it made enough sense to move forward. So the millage plus, if you look at the box on the top right, you see direct access. They'll pay 10% ad valorem and then 70% non-ad valorem. The non-direct will pay 20% ad valorem, and they don't pay a direct assessment. And so that's where you come up with that 80-20 split. And Commissioner Coffin just walked into the room too. So now we have a full house of commissioners. So why does it work? It's fair, familiar, consistent with past practices. It saves money in the long term by avoiding emergency actions. And these are words that were developed by not only our consultant for our engineering consultant, our consultant for financing, but also by a group that we hired to come up with a messaging kind of consultant. It saves money long term by avoiding emergency dredging. So, emergency situations where you're getting into restoration, big impact. Long term on target by the consultant and the contractors to actually dredge those waterways. When you can get past that and get into maintenance, now you're just hitting hot spots. You know what I mean? And so you're going to have less equipment out there behind the houses dredging and making the noise and being disruptive. Enhances overall community value and island resiliency. Again, earlier we mentioned, and I'm going to get into some of the drainage aspects of this. And it maintains and minimizes long-term construction impacts, which I just mentioned. So before we get into questions and comments, and I do appreciate you guys all holding your comments and questions to the end, I just want to go through a little bit more of our website. So in here, we have all the conditions of the waterways. And if you click on this, it actually opens up a box. And that box is the canal sheets. So these guys went and they actually did a conditional survey down every canal. They actually filmed every canal looking for obstructions and whatnot. The canal sheets are based, so if you're in Canal 13, as an example, which is kind of mid canal, mid island, upper northern mid. They looked at every boat that actually services that canal or utilizes that canal, and they kind of classify them. And in it, you'll see that the permitted depth is there, the width is this, and these are all pulled off of previous permits. Again, like I said, the last time we dredged quite a few canals back in 2003, but the permits were pulled from that, so we don't have to recreate that wheel. We can utilize that information, so we're keeping it into the maintenance realm for our permitting agencies. But you can see that the average vessel beam is about 10 feet and the actual draft is about 4 plus on this canal. So maintaining it to 5 is something we'd have to do. This happens to be one of those canals that's already meeting that intent, as best as we can. However, this is one of those canals that if in the future this part shoals in, we can get out there and take care of it. These canals, this is Hideaway Bay, I think, there's some access channels that are skinnier. So what's nice about it, if you go up to the first maps, you can hit control and zoom in on anything that you want to see in here, but you'll be able to see, come on. Oh, there we go. This will be easier. This is the island sheet. So if you see, Canal 13 has to utilize this channel and this access channel to get out. That access channel isn't as in good a shape as 13, but any action we're doing in this is to benefit everybody who comes in 11A to access 11, 12, 13, or 14. So even though now 13 might not need it, the access channel may. So again, it's a program, it's not a project. We're not just pinpointing one thing and going after it. We're actually going after it in a programmatic way. So back into this website, and again, I do encourage you to explore all of this. And if you have any questions or comments, on the bottom of here, you could just click on this box right here. It'll open up whatever your browser is for your email, and then you can send us a question and or a comment. So back into here, Why Now has more of kind of the message I just said. Program funding details, it kind of has it broken down as the first 5 years, and after that, we're going to try to reduce the cost of both the assessment and the millage by half. And then property specific details this is where that other button would take you, or you can just go right to here. And if you go full screen, you can zoom in anywhere you want, and you could see if you're blue, those properties are paying the direct, both the assessment and the millage. So they're direct access. And if you're in the green, then you're not. So you could zoom in, and I'm not going to pick on anybody, but you could just zoom in on any canal and you could just pick any house, and it will tell you that property, and the assessed value is 800 and 3,000. It has one EBU because it has a dock, or it has the ability to have a dock. So the ad valorem assessment would be $50.03 for the first 5 years. And then the fixed assessment would be $620. So the millage would be $50. The tax would be $50.03. And then this 620 is the assessment because that's a direct access property. So for the first 5 years, you're looking at a $670 tax and assessment that would be levied on this property. And then what we do is we actually added in there the maintenance years, the 6 plus. So what would we be looking at? About 343. So I wanted to kind of show you that this is how transparent the town's trying to be in order to, provide the information or the level of information to the taxpayers so that they could see, what does this do on here? You can see like even that canal would have to go out 31A, and 31A at this area, this junction is pretty skinny. So it might need attention, even though if 30A, according to the canal sheets, doesn't need it now, it might need it in the future. That's why it's a program, not a project. So with that, we'll go back.
Can you show where your new grasslands?
That's perfect. Thank you. All right. The question was, can you show where the new grass flats would be? I'm saying this so that way the people online will understand or hear the question. So if you go up to here, we have our subaqueous project where this is the old line. That's the scar from putting in the line that we did back in the 70s. This line, every time you flush your toilet, it eventually goes out this line back to Manatee County where it gets treated. So there is a need because that line is aging that we're in the process of putting in another line. This is called the long bar channel, right? Which is this is a great aerial. But this long bar channel was created by the Army Corps of Engineers back in 1889-ish, and that was the old intercoastal waterway. And then in 1916, they relocated that channel to here. So they abandoned this. And so this is so deep that seagrasses can't grow because it's below the photic zone. The photic zone is the layer of penetration that sunlight can reach to allow grasses to grow. Because this has existed during our permitting process to kind of kickstart the projects within this program, we have to because we are going to be impacting some seagrasses where they weren't mitigated before. We have to create a seagrass mitigation area in this location. So we permitted over 4 acres. We only have to fill between 2 and 3 or something like that acres. But what we're looking to do is utilize, and we've already done the core borings and the grab samples to utilize the dredge material to put into that hole in order to save both time and money in the program. So, the $9 million right now is kind of like in our worst case scenario, if we had to import fill or if we couldn't use as much fill from our canals, but we've actually went and done the research, did the cores, pulled those cores, sent them up to a lab at Eckerd College and had them checked out. And, we have some pretty usable material in our canals. And I need 24,000 cubic yards to fill that hole. So we have a good amount of material that we can put in there, and our permits right now only give us 9,000 cubic yards approximately. So there's a lot of makeup. So in that first cycle of dredging, we might be hitting a lot more just in order to facilitate that need. Now, one of the things I wanted to share before we get into the questions, a lot of questions have come up of why is it 80-20? Why, if I don't live on a canal, do I have to pay the 20%? Well, I already talked about the bioload reduction. We talked about the seagrass mitigation area, which is going to benefit everybody by enhancing our already pristine environment. But at the same time, if we have major rainfalls and we have something called runoff, if those runoffs hit any of the drains, like the drains across here, which is just north of Bayfront Park, we have a series of drains here that exit out underneath these canals, underneath these boats in this canal section. So if what's really interesting about it, and you can even go north of there or south of there, you get into Country Club Shores, and it's a great example of where a lot of these actually do drain into, there's a culvert right here. It actually drains into this canal. All right. So if anything in here happens to get, through a rain event, comes down Gulf of Mexico Drive, where this is actually, from one of the resorts onto the street and makes its way into that culvert, it's going to make its way into those canals. And those are all the way up and down. There's another one here. You can't tell because of the construction on here, but they do exist, especially in this segment. What I found to be interesting, because I actually did a little bit more in-depth research on this. All of these golf course ponds are interconnecting. And so if any runoff happens in this area and it gets into these, because the drains from these roads actually go out into, for the most part, into these ponds. But all this pond system is interconnected, and it eventually makes its way down to here. If you see this, that's called a weir structure. That separates saltwater from freshwater. So obviously the golf courses want to use this freshwater to irrigate this. But if there's enough runoff, you have a bigger storm event, then you're going to have this water coming over this weir structure where it feeds 2 to 3 pipes that come right out here. into Canal 58 or something like that, 55. Same thing happens even over in this location. Like all these interconnecting ponds actually make their way into this weir structure, and then this weir structure actually feeds pipe that drain into here. I'm sorry, actually on this side, they cross the road here and drain into this canal, which is the very north end of Country Club Shores and the very south end of Bay Isles. So that was one of the, and that's just a question that has come up before, like why the 20, why the 20? And our consultants actually looked at all that data and they said, this makes sense. And I think this is what we want to work with. And because it's also fair and familiar with the beach program that we currently have, it seemed to be the way to go. So in here, we'll go back one. So in here, we also house a lot of the frequently asked questions. So as we get questions and they're repetitive questions, we try to capture those and capture the answer and put them in here on both this site and the town's website. And there's other programmatic information in here as well. So again, a very robust website, trying to share information. And right now we're in data collection mode so that way we can come back to the commission in April and present what the outcomes of all these outreach meetings we're able to capture. So at this time, I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'm going to keep these open. So if you have a question, I can play. There's a mic's coming your way, so that way people online can hear.
Just a quick question. So no state or federal funds were available to us, or we didn't qualify for anything?
No, even in my past practices, there's no grants outside of FEMA reimbursement for damage that I've ever been able to find. There are some that maybe on the East Coast that they're using where they have major bioload issues that they might be able to qualify for, but we don't, because we don't have a maintenance program. We haven't been able to demonstrate that we've been maintaining these as infrastructure.
Thank you for all this information. Very helpful. My question is, when you explain how the funding was going to be broken down between categories, I think you used the term non-direct access.
Mhm.
Is that a correct term? Because it's not really, it sounds like you're using that because that's what you use for the beach renourishment, but it's really non-access.
Yeah, well, because if it's an assessment, it has to show a direct benefit. So that's why direct access and non-direct access. So if you don't have direct access, then you're only paying the millage. Because you're showing a direct benefit, that's why I'm using that term. That's the only reason why I'm using that term, is because the assessment is linked to a direct benefit. I hope that answers.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. So I've been a resident owner here for 22 years. I think I'm very supportive of the program. I think you need a government action here because you'll have holdout residents that won't want to pay dredging in front, and it's piggybacking on others' efforts. You just need an overall approach. If we're doing this at all, the only way you can do it is by government. I also like the fact you're recycling a lot of the waste, so it's pretty efficient relative to hauling.
Correct.
So those are really positive things. But I do quibble on the allocation because I don't think it's equitable. I think the analogies, well, I'll first start with, you alluded to, there was a question about the labeling. By using a non-direct label, it seems to me, as a plain reading, to imply there's some indirect benefit. And I quibble with actually whether there is, to the extent we're talking about the residential no outlet canals. As I look at the canals, and your picture shows it quite well, there's a lot of canals that are 20 to 25 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
They all have docks on them or lifts, narrows the navigable gap by up to a third, and maybe even more than a third. If you took a small rental boat because I don't have a boat
Right.
and I don't get a direct benefit. I'm not on a canal, but I could park a boat and anchor it in the front of that canal. And because they're so narrow, no one could get in or out. That's how narrow they are, a lot of them. And because they're no outlet, they're not truly navigable for anyone that's not living on that particular canal. So from my sensibilities, I think you call the other canals access canals. They do broadly benefit navigation. There's some ancillary benefits probably to everyone.
Mhm.
I have no qualms with an allocation about those. But where I could never personally put a boat on your canal, it's hard for me to see why I'm paying for it because it looks a lot to me like a private driveway for boats. And as such, I don't pay for my neighbor's driveway or to reseal it. I think,
Yeah, you're bringing up a great point. However, the town does pave the roads. So like if I was to come in here with a dredge, we would dredge the center line of the canal to what the permitted width was, where we could, like you're saying,
Right.
there are restrictions with docks and whatnot
right,
that would do restrict navigability. But from that center line of that canal to their dock, that's their driveway.
right.
Their dock or their boat lift is their garage. And so while I will put this out there and thank you for your comment, I really do appreciate it. And I'll let you go.
I'm not actually finished, but I'll let you go.
No. I just wanted to like say on that point alone, what we would do at the time when we have a contractor in there, we would reach out to any of the residents that are in the area that the contractor was there and say, hey, while they're here, there's a benefit for you where you could come under a separate contract with that contractor in order to do some dockside dredging for
Right.
much reduced cost. But go ahead, sir.
So I have a hard time seeing much of a strong benefit on these narrow, no outlet canals. I think if you're talking about marketability, or general property values, without question, if we don't dredge these canals, those properties' values will drop because they're much lower usefulness the more they fill in. I doubt people that are on the beach in a condo have a market impact at all. Because when you buy a condo on the beach, you're not saying, oh, by golly, I could take a rented boat and try to go in one of these canals. That's not why you buy that condo.
Right.
So I don't think there's a strong correlation here. And by the way, let's look at the dredging that's occurring right now. The federal government's paying for the dredging of the new pass, 100%.
Yep.
Why? Because it's a public access navigable waterway. It provides a benefit broadly to everyone. Why are they not paying for part of the residential canal dredging? It's because it's private.
Yeah, and the Army Corps doesn't do residential dredging. However, they do dredge like the intercoastal waterway,
That's my
which
point.
all of our canals do connect to.
And that's my point. And that's why it's appropriate for us to say there's a general benefit for access canals. That's different than talking about the residential canals that are no outlet.
Yes, sir.
So from my perspective, it's difficult to see this allocation. I think the analogy to the brief to the beach renourishment is misplaced because under federal law and state law, the public owns the beach up to the high water mark.
No, actually, in our case, they own it up until the erosion control line, which is much further landward.
Even better.
Mhm.
So there's a huge swath of public land on our entire 14-mile island here.
Right.
Everyone on the island, the farthest you are away from a beach is probably 6 city blocks. In many cases, it's 1. It's not difficult to get across the street or to walk to the beach. Last week, someone said we only have 2 access points to the beach. That's completely incorrect. There's 12. And they're spaced and this is by state law. You have to give an easement to get access to that public beach. Therefore, everyone on the island, whether they utilize it or not, has a practical and legal basis to use the beach. The people that are not on the canals do not have a similar use of those canals. So to use the same allocation percentage does not make sense to me. If you ask my honest opinion, it's either 0 or some de minimis percentage for those that are not on canals. And we should be paying for the access canals because those are more broadly navigable.
And again, I'm not justifying anything. We're just here to collect your opinions as well. And that way we can, I think you actually already sent an email as well, didn't you? You did. So,
Yes. What's in the record.
Exactly. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for if we can get the written documentation. Again, that's why we like to direct people to that, where you can click on it and then give us your comments, and that is a benefit. But on the beach side, I will say this, like, we do our beach projects for three reasons. Recreation is one. The other one is habitat for both sea turtles and shorebirds. And the third one, which is more of a direct benefit for those Gulf side properties, is the berm elevations, which is the storm surge protection.
Hi, I'm Terry Boss of Fairway Bay One. I sent in an email on that. I was looking at some possible cost reductions. Um, I authored a hurricane surge report after we had the hurricane on the impacts we had and things that could be improved. In our area, we have a berm around our subdivision of the condos, and we have a low area there where we had a lot of the seawater coming over in the surge by our tennis courts. And the thing I was trying to raise up is that we probably could use some fill in that area to build up the berm to stop it from coming over the parking lots and then getting into the street and then flooding a lot of houses.
And that's a great point, sir. So, another thing of future use, there's a thing called beneficial use of dredge material. And that's something that, again, we're looking to do for the seagrass mitigation. That's our primary focus right now, because we have to build it per permit. But outside of that, when we start getting into maintenance, especially when you're dredging from the upland canals don't have the same kind of rules and regulations a little bit than the access channels and the perimeter channels, because that's the stuff out there is state lands. And so the state requires that material be used for the benefit of the general public, or you actually pay a severance fee. But when you're dredging an upland channel, we're going to be looking for spots where we might be able to deposit some material in a beneficial means. And so, something like that would be a cost benefit to everybody.
Yeah, so it was on 33B, stations 51 through 53 is the area that's low right next to the channel. And it seems like an easy place to put it. The only question I had was how long does it take the salt to kind of filter out of the fill material?
Typically, it depends too on your rains. Okay. Once you stack that material, in past practices, it could take a year, before the rains and everything else make it percolate the salt down, where you can not be burning grass and stuff. In other cases, though, if it's good sand like we were finding in these, and they percolate a lot quicker, that time can go down a lot more. However, anytime you're pulling material from a saline or aquatic environment, it takes a while for it to actually compact enough. So if you ever want to build like some type of structure on there, you might be waiting for compaction a little bit longer.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
I just want to make sure I understand the assessment. So are you saying that the fees are going to be based on the property's assessment? So for instance, if there's two houses on the same canal, one's $1 million, one's $2 million, the $2 million house will get double the amount of the assessment than the $1 million.
Double the amount of the millage, which is the tax. The assessment's a flat fee. So yes, and then let's go back into that. So we'll just, again, not picking on anybody, just picking on this. We'll use an example. In here, we have a $1 million property, and it has one equivalent benefit unit. And then so you can see that the total fee for the first 5 years would be $689. Typically, if you go to the end where the property is a little bit bigger, you see a $3 million. And you can see that for the first 5 years, it's an $830 assessment. And again, that's because the millage rate is set real low. It's set at 0.0623. Being that low of a millage, on a taxable value property, it breaks it down. It's $210 versus, and then the 620, and we go back to the other property, and the ad valorem was 69. So 210 versus 69.
kind of camping onto that point, a couple last 2 points made. I'm in Emerald Harbor, 82 homes, all on water. I don't think we're getting any dredging going on. And kind of camping onto what was said previously, I'm in favor of this. I think it's a great idea. I think generally we all benefit, but it seems like we need a more benefit-based approach. If you're in a canal that's not getting dredged versus a canal that's getting dredged, there's a dramatic benefit differential. And I know there's the future and potential, but that's where the maintenance comes in. So it seems like there's going to be a subset of canal owners that are going to get a disproportionate benefit. Those who get
Initially, potentially, yes, but
it's initially yes,
Okay.
not potentially.
all right.
Because if you have a canal that's, not dredged and you have limited passageway, it really will impact the value of that property big time, especially for those who have larger boats, if they're non-starters.
Right. And part of the program is to monitor like the conditions of all the canals as we're moving forward. So it's not just to go out there and dredge these and then, there's going to be monitoring that's going to happen on a yearly, bi-yearly, basis where we're going out there and checking the conditions. We need to know that so we can develop what's the shoaling rates, what canals are shoaling in, what access channels that Emerald Harbor might actually use are shoaling in as well. So that way we can develop that program and eventually actually reduce those maintenance costs because we're projecting the maintenance costs to be half from the original assessments. But if we can reduce those even further through that maintenance and through that observation, that's something we're going to be doing as part of the program.
Do you clearly know which canals got dredged back, 20 plus years ago? Do you see certain canals getting refilled more quickly than other canals, or you haven't?
We don't know because it's been 23 years.
Right, but
So
for Emerald Harbor, the canals don't need to be dredged. And I don't know, they either got dredged back 20 years ago, but they've maintained the fact that now they don't need to be dredged, but there's plenty of other canals that do. And so I guess there are some canals more likely to constantly need to be dredged than others. So then kind of to the point of some houses will need more maintenance or some canals will need more maintenance just because of where they are or some other.
and again, that's part of the program to be able to develop that, because right now when you haven't done work in 23 years, it's hard to come up with those facts or figures, you know what I mean? Because even in all the canals that were dredged probably in 2023, maybe some of them don't need to be dredged, but some of them do. That's something that we would have to look at.
I'm curious, to that ends, how are y'all determining the depths of these canals?
Previously
And are you going
permitted.
off lower of low tide, or where are you taking your measurements to?
It's mean low water.
Okay.
All state permits and federal permits are based on mean low water. And they're based off of how we're basing what is necessary out there is off the boat surveys by which they've done.
Okay, so they have done surveys separate from the
Mhm.
geological surveys. 'Cause
And
I know those are way off. I boat every day almost. I know the depths of these waters, and they're not anything what charts are showing. They're going to be very determinate of what's actually on the ground. And I'm curious how you are doing that.
and that changes on a daily basis, so that because it's just, it's a very influx environment that these canals have to live in.
And then are y'all doing, so all your green areas, including condos, commercial owners, I would assume also were being assessed?
Commercial owners are being assessed as well. On the north end, we have, were these updated, the Marvis? So we have these dock structures will be counted as one unit per, so if you have 7 or 8 slips, they'll have, 7 assessments plus their millage that they would be paying. Same thing with cannons, same thing with the boathouse, so on and so forth.
And do you have that broken down by how many green properties you have and how many direct access properties you have on the website showing those numbers?
I'm not sure if the access and direct access are listed on here. Something we can definitely add, but I think Tara might have that.
I don't think that specific statistic, try that 3 times fast, is listed on the website, but just memory serves, it's about 60-40, 40% direct access, 60% not. Island-wide, roughly.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could discuss the project that's going on in New Pass. And those of us who live there and are impacted by this 24/7, it's very difficult. Are we going to be assessed? Those of us who live on New Pass, how is that going to work?
No, there's if you live on New Pass, there are, if you look, there are some docks that exist, up in here and then and around. And then some of these are considered outside of the CCCL. We have to adjust this map, which would require, if you're outside of the CCCL, which is the Coastal Construction Control Line, you would require another layer of permitting, which would put you into what's called a joint coastal permitting process. So those might be exempt from being able to have a dock. But if you do have a dock, then yes, you would be assessed within. I'm pretty sure you probably live out in this stretch.
Yes, we're right on the corner in Sands Point.
Okay.
Some of us have.
You're one of the properties that is seaward of the CCCL. This map needs to be adjusted.
Okay.
Yeah.
And could you tell us how long this project will go on in New Pass?
The New Pass, again, that's a federal project that's in coalition with the West Coast Inland Navigation District and the city of Sarasota. They're dredging that channel right now. They've already dredged what's called, and I'm just going off of memory, okay, so bear with me, but they dredge cuts 2 and 3, and now they're out here hitting cuts 1 and 2. As soon as they're done with those 2, they'll do a final sweep in here, come through, and they're going to dredge a couple of the cuts going this way. I can send you, or I could find the link for the Army Corps project because it's not a town project. And I can let you know, but they have like timelines, they have updates. They even have the contacts with the city of Sarasota that if you have any other additional information that you want to provide them or ask them, I can get you that information.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Charlie, we at First Line do have some very periphery involvement with that project, so I may have just a little bit of extra intel. I can tell you that project has a must complete date established as April 30th, which coincides with the start of sea turtle nest season on Lido Key. From just the little bit I know about the project, I think the latest schedule I've heard is mid-April is the latest schedule I've heard.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Are there any other questions? There's one back there. We'll just wait for the
Not to be funny here, but you have measured the water levels 23 years ago and now, right?
No.
The canal water levels?
No, so what we're basing it off of 23 years ago, there was bathymetric surveys that were done to get the permits in order to get the contractors out there to do the dredging. And then there was as-built surveys that went along with it to make sure that they were dredged to the depth and the width and everything that they were supposed to. And then what we did was just over a year ago, maybe closer to 2 now, is we went out there and just did a conditional survey running up and down the canals with the same type of equipment that you would use to do the bathymetric survey for construction or for permitting, just to get a conditional idea of what's out there.
I was thinking we would have water levels rising. I've been told we would for the last 15 years.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you're right, because they're about to set the tidal datum that's coming down the line this year. I think in our area, it's about a half a foot that they're actually going to adjust that mean low water is going to go up a half a foot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
She's getting her steps in, people.
Thank you. I have a question and a comment, but first I'd like to just thank the township leadership and staff for getting this project moving. I think if we had a time machine, we wouldn't have waited. We'd go back and not wait 23 years, and that makes the process probably a little more painful from a funding standpoint, but it's terrific that it's happening. My question is related to permitting. Do you have permits in hand approved? Are there pending permits? what do you anticipate the permit process to look like in terms of any barriers or potential setbacks? And my comment is, I was really happy to hear you made a comment that the residents on the water will be able to negotiate with the contractors. I would encourage you to highly publicize that, because when this is done, there's people out there that come out and they kind of pump water to clear lifts and docks. And where does that fill go? It goes right back into the channel. If we get the contractor to do it, it's going to be hauled away and seagrass mitigation. So that's a great option. And I just want to make sure everyone knows about it.
Yeah, we will. And to your first comments, we already have permits. The permits that we have now are for those ones that weren't permitted for, in some cases, back in 2023. In 2023, there was a big, there was a massive effort that took place to permit through 3 different permits all of, the canals that they dredged back then. So what we would be doing is just applying for exemptions, because where dredging has happened in the past, you should be able to dredge again. And so we're going to be applying for exemptions in those cases. And same thing with the Army Corps. And most of the time, I don't know if SPGP still exists, but it probably does, because it existed, then it didn't exist, and now it exists again. But that allows the federal government or the state to act on behalf of the federal government. So if you can prove that it's maintenance only, then the permitting takes, it could take weeks or just months, not years. And so we're going to line that up along with the program. And so with that, I mean, one of the other questions comes out, hey, when can we start, if there's any way of starting sooner than later? And what we've done, because that $3 million, remember, I want to hit a bunch of canals, not just the ones that are tied to the existing permit, which is only 14, 15 canals. I want to hit a bunch more so I can start to affect change for everybody, so we can extend this program and reduce cost. So we actually asked, because like I mentioned before, this funny little waterway that goes on the opposite side of where it should be, that we have to, or I'm sorry, the funny little waterway on this one that goes opposite of where it should go. We actually asked for an appropriations through the Water Resource Development Act of 2026. So it's brand new, it just got published. And in it, they said, hey, look, if you have a mitigation project, you could potentially get funding for that. So I'm like, hey, Army Corps, you created this back in 1880s, and then you put it over here, but you abandoned that. What we're trying to do is fix the problem to also booster the seagrass beds that happen to be in one of your own national estuaries. So, we're working that. We're working every angle we can to actually even further reduce costs on this. And so if we're able to, get that, and that's successful, that's one thing. The other thing too is like, say we weren't able to, is there a way that we could potentially take out a short-term loan in order to jumpstart this? Because this was always developed as a pay-as-you-go program. So we would have to collect money for at least the first 3 years before we could start actually affecting change. That's adding 3 years to 23 years, so again, we're, as staff and as the commission and as our management team, because we have our assistant town manager right back there, go for anything that you can. And that's what we're doing in order to try to reduce the cost and the overall impact on the community.
And no additional permit to go directly with the contractor on clearing out?
No, there's a contractor sitting right back there. Raise your hand, wave to everybody. Yes, so you got a couple. These guys know that dockside dredgings are covered underneath the same exemptions that I mentioned, especially if you live in an upland canal. And also, they just have to apply for the exemption, the notice of exemption. And there's Army Corps nationwide permits that cover dockside dredging that along with that, I don't know, 14 or something like that, nationwide 14. But those 2 are the arms by which they do it. But again, like you mentioned before, advertising way in advance. So that way, a marine contractor, if they were hired, they know I'm going to be coming over here. Let me start the paperwork with them, get the contract going, and then settle on a fee, because typically it's by barge load, by bucket load, by whatever. It's much reduced.
That process required that dredge, that question has to be being dredged. If you're in a non-dredged canal, can you say that dirt?
Yes, you can. So the question was, if you're in a canal that, you might need to have some dockside dredging, but you're not in the ones that need immediate attention. Yes, if in geographically, if you're in an area that they could go hit, they're going to go hit. And when I started that program in Charlotte County, we did it the first couple of times in some pretty big major jobs where they were there for like a year, these dredging contractors. I got one or two per canal saying, yeah, come do me, come do me. The next year I went there it was like, I was like, hey, contractor, you have to do the county job. You can't just do the residential dredging. But once word of mouth gets out, people take advantage of it because it is a massive savings. If you think about it, you're not paying them to mobilize to your site. They're already there. Sir, back there.
Yeah, I got 3 points actually. I'd like to thank you all as well. Definitely the town for this. One thing was Helene taken into account as a result of all the debris and everything that was washed in the canals? And then secondly, if you started today, could you guesstimate how long it would take to complete every canal?
Yeah, two great questions. First, Helene, we tried, but because we couldn't demonstrate maintenance. We weren't able to get FEMA to come out and dredge. But we were able to get them to come out and try to like remove as much debris. We were working with FDEM, Florida Division of Emergency Management, a bunch of people, West Coast Inland Navigation District to remove derelict vessels, our police, the Sheriff's Department, all the way down the line. Obviously stuff, there are onesie twosies. We literally 2 weeks ago, hey, there's a mattress in the canal. My guys went out and moved it. You know what I mean? So we're here to service you. Obviously, that exceptional service is our motto. Obviously we don't have the resources that some of these big agencies have, but we do the best we can. What was the second question? Oh, if you're going to start now, how long would it take? Again, if you look back at the 2003 dredge, in lieu of being able to take that material out to this spoil site. So if you have a contractor, he's only handling it once. He's dredging it from you and depositing it over there. However, the travel distance is a little bit big. Back in 2003, they had to come up with what's called a DMMA, a dredge management site, basically is what it stands for. And there was 2 of them and they were huge. And one of them actually blew out and there was a consent order and blah, blah, blah. But they had to handle that material like 2 to 3 times before it met its final destination. But that project was about a year long. To do the restoration, we're probably looking at a year's worth of impact on the island.
Thank you.
And I'm just guesstimating, okay? I'm just off of past experience.
Well, I'd like to show every canal and whether it would be scheduled to be made.
Again, even if it says it's a B right now, we might need material out of that B in order to like make up that deficit, the 16,000 cubic yard deficit that I currently have to fill that seagrass mitigation area. So we're going to be hitting wherever there is suitable material to get to that magic number. Because if I start importing fill in, I have to import it, let it sit on a place, have a marine contractor go out there and grab it, put it on a barge, take it out there, and then deposit it. So the more you handle material, the more it costs. And that's why, like in our beach projects, we average about $30 a cubic yard when we do the big beach fills from offshore sand sources. And you double that cost when you truck in material because of the amount of handling. Are there any other questions? Well, I thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't signed in, sign in. Again, I do encourage, if you have any other questions and or comments, please utilize that site. And thank you